Have you ever left a party feeling like someone literally unplugged your battery? Or found yourself hiding in the bathroom at a social event, not because you're antisocial, but because you desperately need to recharge? Here's something that might surprise you. Feeling socially drained isn't a weakness, a flaw, or something you need to fix. It's actually a fascinating psychological phenomenon that reveals how your brain processes the world around you. Today, we're diving deep into the psychology of social exhaustion. And I promise by the end of this video, you'll understand yourself or someone you love in a completely different way. What if I told you that your brain might be working overtime during social interactions in ways that other people's brains simply don't? That while some people gain energy from crowds and conversations, your nervous system is performing complex calculations, reading micro-expressions, and processing social data at an extraordinary rate. The psychology behind social drainage is far more complex than the simple introvert versus extrovert label that gets thrown around. We're talking about neurobiology, sensory processing, emotional labor, and evolutionary psychology all colliding in your daily life. Before we continue, if you've ever felt guilty for needing alone time, or if someone has ever made you feel too sensitive for getting overwhelmed in social situations, hit that like button. You're not alone, and this video is for you. And make sure to subscribe because we're exploring the fascinating intersection of psychology and everyday life on this channel. Let's start with what's actually happening in your brain when you feel socially drained. Research in neuroscience has revealed something incredible. Not all brains process social stimulation the same way. When you're in a social environment, your brain is doing far more work than you realize. Every conversation requires your brain to decode verbal language and tone, read facial expressions and body language, predict what the other person might say next, formulate appropriate responses, monitor your own behavior and adjust accordingly, navigate social rules and cultural expectations, and manage your emotional responses in real time. Think about that for a moment. All of this is happening simultaneously, often within milliseconds. For some people, this process is relatively automatic and energy efficient. But for others, particularly those high in sensory processing sensitivity, this cognitive load is significantly heavier. Dr. Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive persons, or HSPs, shows that approximately 15 to 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes information more deeply. Your brain isn't just skimming the surface of social interactions. It's diving deep, noticing subtleties, picking up on emotional undercurrents that others might miss entirely. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Studies on introverts versus extroverts have found differences in how their brains respond to dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and pleasure. Extroverts have a more active dopamine reward system in response to external stimulation. Social interaction literally gives them a chemical high, but introverts are more sensitive to dopamine, meaning they can become overstimulated more easily. Their brains prefer the calmer neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which is activated during quiet, introspective activities. So when you feel drained after socializing, it's not in your head. Well, actually, it is in your head, but in a very real neurobiological way. Your brain chemistry is literally different. Now, let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention: the invisible emotional labor that happens during social interactions. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it can be to be around someone who's in a bad mood, even if they're not directing it at you? Or how draining it is to navigate a conversation with someone who talks endlessly without pausing for breath? This is because of something called emotional contagion. Research shows that emotions are literally contagious. When you're around other people, your brain's mirror neurons fire in response to their emotional states. If someone is anxious, your body might start producing stress hormones in response. If someone is effusively enthusiastic, your system has to match or manage that energy. For people who feel socially drained easily, this mirroring system often works in overdrive. You're not just aware of other people's emotions, you're absorbing them, processing them, and often regulating them, all while trying to maintain your own emotional equilibrium. It's like being an emotional sponge in a room full of spilled feelings. Think about the last time you comforted a friend going through a breakup. You probably left that conversation feeling emotionally exhausted, right? You weren't just listening, you were holding space for their pain, managing your own emotional response to their distress, finding the right words, reading their cues about what they needed. That's profound emotional labor, and it takes real energy. Now imagine doing a lighter version of this in every single social interaction throughout your day. The colleague who overshares about their personal problems, the family member who needs constant reassurance, the friend who always needs to be the center of attention. Even positive interactions require emotional energy, especially if you're someone who deeply processes feelings. Let's address something crucial: sensory overstimulation. Social situations aren't just about conversations. They're multi-sensory experiences that can overwhelm your nervous system in ways you might not even consciously recognize. Picture yourself at a typical social gathering. There's music playing in the background, maybe too loud. Multiple conversations are happening simultaneously, voices overlapping. The room might be too hot or too cold. There are smells from food and perfumes and bodies in close proximity. People are moving around. There's visual stimulation everywhere you look. Someone touches your arm while talking to you. Your clothes might feel uncomfortable. The lighting is harsh or dim or flickering. Your brain is processing all of this simultaneously while also trying to engage in meaningful conversation. For someone with a sensitive nervous system, this is the equivalent of trying to have a deep philosophical discussion while running a marathon in a thunderstorm. It's simply not sustainable for extended periods. Research on sensory processing sensitivity shows that highly sensitive individuals have heightened activity in brain regions associated with awareness, empathy, and processing sensory information. Your brain is literally taking in more data and processing it more thoroughly than less sensitive individuals. This isn't a disorder or a problem, it's a trait. But it does mean that you reach your capacity for stimulation more quickly. Have you ever noticed that you feel more drained after large group gatherings than intimate one-on-one conversations? That's because the sensory load increases exponentially with the number of people in a space. More voices to track, more social dynamics to navigate, more emotional states to process, more potential for unexpected interactions. Here's a question that might hit close to home. How much energy do you spend pretending to be more social than you actually feel? How often do you put on what researchers call your social mask? The concept of masking, originally studied in autism research but applicable to anyone who feels socially drained, refers to the conscious or unconscious suppression of natural responses in order to appear more socially acceptable. You might force yourself to smile when you're feeling overwhelmed. You might laugh at jokes that aren't funny to you. You might engage in small talk that feels meaningless while your internal battery is flashing red. This code switching between your authentic self and your social persona requires enormous cognitive and emotional resources. It's like running two operating systems simultaneously on your mental computer. One is processing the actual social interaction, and the other is monitoring and adjusting your performance to meet social expectations. Studies on workplace emotional labor show that employees who regularly mask their true emotions experience higher rates of burnout, emotional exhaustion, and even physical health problems. When you're constantly performing a version of yourself rather than being yourself, the disconnect creates psychological stress that manifests as that drained, depleted feeling. The tragedy here is that many people who feel socially drained spend years believing something is wrong with them, that they're not trying hard enough, that they need to push through and be more social, so they mask harder, drain faster, and feel worse about themselves in a vicious cycle. What if you're not failing at being social? What if you're actually succeeding at something much harder, maintaining social performance despite your nervous system screaming for a break? Let's clear up a massive misconception. Feeling socially drained does not automatically mean you're an introvert. And being an introvert doesn't mean you hate people or are antisocial. These oversimplifications have created so much confusion and self-misunderstanding. Introversion and extroversion, as originally conceived by psychologist Carl Jung and later refined by researchers, are about where you direct your energy and how you recharge. Introverts tend to recharge through solitude and quiet reflection. Extroverts tend to recharge through social interaction and external stimulation. But here's the nuance that gets lost. This is a spectrum, not a binary, and it doesn't tell the whole story of social drainage. You can be an extrovert who loves people, but still feels socially drained in certain contexts. Maybe you thrive in deep one-on-one conversations, but find large networking events exhausting. Maybe you love social interaction, but need specific types of engagement that feel meaningful rather than superficial. You can be an introvert who enjoys socializing more than people expect, but simply needs recovery time afterward. Your enjoyment of social interaction and your energy expenditure during social interaction are two separate things. The real question isn't whether you're introverted or extroverted. The real questions are, what specific types of social interactions drain you? What contexts make socializing harder? What do you need in order to recharge? And most importantly, are you honoring those needs or fighting against them? Here's something fascinating that research consistently shows. For people who feel socially drained, the quality of social interaction matters far more than the quantity. An hour of deep, authentic conversation with someone you trust can be energizing. But 3 hours of superficial small talk at a networking event can leave you completely depleted. Why is this? It comes down to cognitive and emotional efficiency. When you're having a meaningful conversation with someone who truly listens and engages, your brain doesn't have to work as hard. You're not constantly calculating social dynamics, reading hidden agendas, or managing awkward silences. The interaction has flow. There's mutual understanding. The emotional labor is balanced rather than one-sided. But surface-level interactions, especially with people you don't know well or don't feel safe with, require constant vigilance. Your social radar is on high alert. You're managing impressions, avoiding potential conflicts, searching for common ground, filling awkward pauses. It's mentally exhausting because you can never fully relax into the interaction. This is why many people who identify as socially drained actually have rich, fulfilling social lives, just structured differently than society expects. They might have a small circle of close friends rather than a large network of acquaintances. They might prefer dinner parties with 4 people over clubs with 400. They might choose depth over breadth in every aspect of their social world. There's nothing wrong with this preference. In fact, research on relationship satisfaction shows that people who prioritize deep connections over numerous shallow connections report higher levels of well-being and life satisfaction. Quality absolutely trumps quantity when it comes to meaningful human connection. So what do you do when you're feeling socially drained? Let's talk about evidence-based strategies for recovery and prevention. First, understand that alone time isn't selfish. It's necessary maintenance for your nervous system. Just as your phone needs to be plugged in to recharge, your brain needs periods of low stimulation to restore its resources. This might look like physical solitude, but it can also mean being alone in a crowd, like taking a solo walk in a park or sitting in a quiet coffee shop with a book. Second, develop what psychologists call transition rituals. These are small practices that help your nervous system shift from social mode to recovery mode. Maybe it's a specific playlist you listen to on your drive home from events. Maybe it's a hot shower or a cup of tea in silence. Maybe it's 10 minutes of deep breathing or stretching. These rituals signal to your brain that it's safe to stop performing and start recovering. Third, practice the art of strategic socializing. This means being intentional about when, where, and how you engage socially. Can you arrive at events a bit later and leave a bit earlier? Can you build in buffer time before and after social commitments? Can you choose events that align with your values and interests rather than saying yes to everything out of obligation? Fourth, communicate your needs clearly. This is perhaps the hardest but most important strategy. The people who care about you want to understand you, saying, "I need to leave early tonight because I'm feeling overstimulated," or "Can we do a phone call instead of meeting up?" "I'm running low on social energy" isn't rude, it's honest, and it allows others to respect your boundaries. Finally, stop apologizing for your needs. You wouldn't apologize for needing food when you're hungry or sleep when you're tired. Social drainage is equally valid. Your nervous system's needs are real, and honoring them is an act of self-respect, not selfishness. Let's reframe something important. What if feeling socially drained isn't a weakness, but actually a superpower that comes with a cost? Research consistently shows that people with heightened sensitivity and deeper processing tend to be more empathetic, more creative, more conscientious, and more aware of subtleties in their environment. You notice things others miss. You pick up on emotional dynamics that sail right past less sensitive people. You think deeply about interactions and relationships. You create meaningful connections rather than superficial networks. You're often the friend people come to when they need real support because you truly see them. These aren't character flaws, these are profound gifts. The challenge is learning to manage the energy cost that comes with these gifts without dimming your natural sensitivity. It's about finding sustainable ways to exist in a world that often feels too loud, too bright, too fast, and too shallow. Think about it this way: a high-performance sports car requires premium fuel and more frequent maintenance than a standard sedan. That doesn't make it inferior, it makes it specialized. Your nervous system is the high-performance version, and it requires different care and feeding than the standard model. The goal isn't to become less sensitive, The goal is to create a life structure that honors your sensitivity while protecting your energy, to surround yourself with people who understand and appreciate how you're wired, to give yourself permission to engage with the world in ways that feel authentic rather than exhausting. So, where does this leave us? If you felt socially drained, if you've ever wondered why something that seems so effortless for others feels so exhausting for you, I hope this video has offered some validation and understanding. You're not broken, you're not antisocial, you're not failing at being human, you're simply wired differently, and that wiring comes with both challenges and extraordinary gifts. The psychology of social drainage is complex, involving neurobiology, personality traits, sensory processing, emotional labor, and individual life experiences. Understanding these factors doesn't make the exhaustion disappear, but it does remove the shame and self-judgment that often accompany it. Remember, your worth isn't measured by how many social events you can attend or how long you can maintain your social mask. Your worth comes from the depth of your connections, the authenticity of your presence, and the unique perspective you bring to the world.